report to the full body of the task force. And before we get started, I'd like to welcome Legislator Damian, and he's going to be joining our group, and we look forward to his participation. And thank you for your interest and for your willingness to serve on the task force. So we're going to follow the similar format as we did in the last full session, and we will have reports from each of the working groups. And with that, I would like to introduce Colin Smith, and he will be giving us he will be giving us the report for the accountability working group.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Bartlett. I didn't know I was going to be up first, but I'll do it. So, and I want to thank Cheryl Lynn for putting together once again this comprehensive, body of information for the report today. So I'm essentially just reading what has been prepared for me, and thank you to the accountability working group as well for the time and effort and hard work that we've all been doing to come up with these recommendations. So without any further ado, let's see. Since our last general task force meeting, we have met twice, and we have not had any guest speakers since that time, but we do have a couple in the pipeline. We are in the process currently of scheduling meetings with Legislator Chris Johnson, who is going to come and speak with us about his proposals with regard to review board legislation, and also with Mr. Vince Toomey with respect to labor laws and policies as they affect the disciplinary process and recruitment and hiring. He is from the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. Addition to that, a representative from the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement to discuss how to structure an independent review board that is focused on meaningful enforcement, accountability, transparency, and integrity, so that the public has confidence bringing matters to it and in the outcomes. Now, speaking of outcomes, in addition to the recommendations that we reported on at the last meeting, here are some of the key issues and needs that we have identified. Number one would be to assess the impact of the state legislation currently scheduled to take effect on April 21st of 2021, which is which will create an office, the Law Enforcement Misconduct Investigative Office. It was introduced last year, I believe, and then signed and then passed by both houses and signed by the government this year. That's, I'm not going to go into all the details of that legislation, but essentially it will serve a lot of the same functions, or potentially serve a lot of the same functions of the proposed review board. So we want to assess the impact of that legislation on our recommendations that the county establish a centralized body to investigate police misconduct. We want to, determine whether the county's jurisdiction might be preempted, whether it might have jurisdiction, and or whether its jurisdiction should be limited to circumstances not covered by the new law scheduled to take effect in 2021. In addition to that, some of the other things we view as important to identify are: we wanted to find out the number of lawsuits and NDAs, or non-disclosure agreements, the full financial cost to the county, and the average duration of a case in assessing how an independent complaint review board might impact these. We want to assess also whether those lawsuits, NDAs, and as well as the financial and other associated costs to municipalities might incentivize them to opt into an independent countywide review board, such as the one we are proposing, which would have the jurisdiction to investigate civilian complaints, as well as officer complaints of misconduct, whistleblower, and potentially to investigate officer-involved shootings or incidents of serious physical injury to a civilian or in custody deaths. We also want to look into the legality and the feasibility of potentially requiring officers to carry liability insurance to indemnify the county if, in fact, the county is financially liable as a result of an officer's willful or reckless conduct. We talked about looking into the creation of a public registry, which would identify officers who were fired or were found to have engaged in gross misconduct. We also want to look at policies or potential laws that could require a county police officer, that would require when there is a county police involved shooting or incidents involving serious physical injury to a civilian and or custody, an in-custody death of a civilian, that it be investigated by an independent agency, looking into how we would enforce those findings, as well as the viability of a centralized and independent investigative body established by the county to provide that function for municipalities who want to share services. We also, another thing that we were looking at is whether or not it would violate the civil service laws or collective bargaining agreements to consider an officer's contribution, such as, for example, community engagement efforts when it comes to hiring and promotions. We are, looking at making changes to the Westchester County Public Safety website so that members of the public would have easy access to a form to file complaints anonymously. Also, we were looking at creating a portal on that website so that members of the public can also commend and thank officers and the department for, for jobs well done, or just, when a community member wants to, express their gratitude for work done by the county police. We're also looking at creating a separate portal to allow members of the county police department to be able to make anonymous complaints as well as to offer suggestions to the department. So, with respect to our recommendations, in addition to the 6 initial recommendations which were discussed at the September meeting, we are also now including the following. We are proceeding with the recommendation to create a centralized body to investigate police misconduct, notwithstanding the new state law or policy, with requiring officers to carry their own liability insurance and creating a requirement for indemnification by them, could be a state or county law or a department policy. Creating a public registry so that officers who engage in gross misconduct and or are fired do not enjoy a cloak of secrecy such that they potentially could be rehired by another unsuspecting municipality. That would likely be an issue of state or county legislation. Requiring that an independent law enforcement agency investigate any officer-involved shooting or incident involving the serious physical injury to a civilian. This could be a state or county law or department policy. And also how to formally acknowledge the how to formally acknowledge the sort of the less measurable aspects of sort of the good that an officer brings or a recruit brings to the department, such as being involved in the creation of a community program, youth engagement, things of that nature, with respect to promoting and hiring. For example, these efforts can be factored into promotions in such a way as to honor the efforts and encourage other officers. And let's see. Okay, so what are some of the opportunities that you see within this issue? As a goal of accountability is to incentivize proper conduct and to deter. A requirement of indemnification, while standard in some industries, is relatively new to law enforcement and could prove to be a powerful deterrence to misconduct. Creating a mechanism to formally credit important work done by officers that falls outside perhaps the bounds of the traditional incentivizes creativity and greater personal investment in policing by our officers. By requiring an independent law enforcement agency to investigate police-involved shootings and incidents of serious physical injury or in custody deaths of civilians, this should enhance the public's confidence in the findings of such investigations. And in addition to that, creating a centralized and independent investigative body established by the county to provide that function for municipalities who want to share services has the promise of consistency that can further enhance the public's confidence in the findings. Lastly, establishing a portal so that the Westchester County Police Department officers can anonymously file complaints and offer suggestions facilitates accountability and a deeper investment in the department. What are some of the challenges that we observed? Well, there's existing laws, as I spoke about earlier. We're going to look into that. There are cultural impediments to reporting misconduct of officers by fellow officers. Possible reluctance of municipalities agreeing to share services with the county, and of course, the costs, the dollar amount involved. What is currently working? The small number of disciplinaries and citizen complaints for our police department suggests professionalism and high standards in the department, as well as the county police department's openness to the scrutiny that it is receiving, which is always much appreciated. And I think that's it for our report.
Colin, really wonderful presentation. And, having served with you on that working group, as with all the others, I know you guys have put in a tremendous amount of effort. And I think you summed it up very well with the report. So I thank you very much. And again, we were not intending to call you first, but we knew you would hold up well, and you have. So thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Are we going to? Right. So what we will do is we'll follow in the format of our last meeting. If anyone has any questions, please,
If you could, if anybody has questions, if you could indicate so in the chat, I'll make sure that you're unmuted and able to ask the question. Thank you so much. In order to access the chat icon, by the way, if you look on the central screen, there should be a little icon that looks like a word balloon. Alternatively, in the bottom right-hand corner, there should be a little button that says chat. Click on that, type your question in there, and I'll unmute you.
Yeah, it was for Damian, right?
Okay. No questions at this time.
All right, great. Thank you. So then the next group that we would ask to give its report is the Community Engagement Group, and Corinne Patino will be delivering the report on behalf of that working group.
All right, I'm off mute. Yes. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Corinne Patino. I'm a member of the Community Engagement Working Group. Our last meeting was September 24th. Our guest speakers were Executive Director of Neighbors Lincoln Mount Kisco, Carola Bracco, and Westchester County Police Officer Edwin Ramirez. They both played an integral part in PACT, police and community together out of Mount Kisco. And they shared with us their experiences and how PACT has evolved and has strengthened at this point. So during this meeting, we identified a couple key issues and needs. The first key issue was, how do we identify and support proactive police officers? A question that was asked was, how do we find more Eddies? So we started to ask him questions and also have dialogue within ourselves. And the conversation kind of shifted from what the community needs to also what police officers need and how they could be encouraged within their own profession, what issues they encounter when they want to participate, when they have an idea, when they want a certain type of training. So an issue is trying to help police officers also obtain and strengthen and cultivate their strengths and help them be involved in how to, and also motivating police officers to be involved. From the hiring process all to when they're, in service. What do they need from us? Moreover, we need, another issue is we need data-informed programs, evidence-based programs. Community programs need to be designed using evaluative tools and data to support the efficacy of these programs in order to consider them as a model for community engagement. While the county is one, no two police agencies are identical, so we must identify common needs as well as specific needs. Proactive policing. What does this look like? What's the connection to the community? We need to figure out what steps need to be taken to encourage proactive policing and not just reactive policing. We also need to figure out how well officers know the communities that they serve. This is tied into proactive policing and crime prevention. We need to explore how to measure the effective crime prevention strategies and initiatives as opposed to just looking at numbers. All right, initial recommendations. We decided that an initial recommendation must be to include intercultural competency as a separate form of training. Intercultural competency is the capability to see and acknowledge the cultural differences and commonalities present before them and appropriately adapt their behavior and communication. Intercultural competency affects the way we listen, what we see, what we hear, and how we respond. Our implicit biases and previous cultural experiences can be an unconscious guide in every area of our decision-making process. The way police officers respond to cultural differences will be experienced by those who are culturally other, which may also have a direct impact on the tenor of relationships, cooperation, and collaboration between police and community members. The way we understand intercultural competency as a core and necessary value of leadership will also impact the way we equip leaders to engage with community members, community problems, and community solutions. We need to reinforce this training by placing more officers in the community. As stated in a report we were sent, quote, even the best intentioned officers who can recite principles from training are often still at a loss as to what they should do the next time they encounter an issue on the street corner in the middle of the night. Thus, trust and legitimacy are ultimately built on social interactions. This means that more officers need to be involved in community policing and community engagement instead of relying on only one officer, one division, one program. We also need to use data evidence to design programs in order to measure the effectiveness. We need to figure out the type of models and framework needed to design these programs, unique to each community. We also need to give each officer an opportunity to share their feelings, their ideas, their suggestions, and to even anonymously file complaints to their respective departments about what's going on in their particular areas, precincts, municipalities. Giving officers a transparent opportunity to request training in areas that are of interest to them. Some opportunities that we see is the opportunity in the academy to talk about effective ways to address communities in order to establish respect and to build trust. We need to identify a liaison between police community during the training process and the life of the officer's career, to sit down with the chief to help identify and explore the terms of the department. Potentially create a position such as Chief of Community Affairs, a resource that the community can go to for constructive criticism. For example, more of a presence here, or a police in a non-enforcement role to come to an event or to speak to the community. Community awareness should not be limited to facets of policing. It does not matter if they are police, detectives, law enforcement officers should be able to walk into the community and find witnesses or feel comfortable speaking to different people and be a part of the community. We also need to take this as an opportunity to strengthen our relationships with community organizations who we already work with, such as Neighbors Link, but we also need to see this as an opportunity to develop engagement strategies with those we have yet to work with, such as other nonprofits, hospitals, businesses, libraries, houses of worship, etc. Some challenges that we've observed. More time is needed to dedicate to research. We need in-depth research to analyze county procedures. We need to compare other counties similar to Westchester, and we need to provide in-depth analysis and suggestions. There's not a lot of research done on community policing, and we need to look at this in depth. The county should do a full assessment on why community engagement models are not more prolific throughout the county. Did officers have supervisory support and freedom to do that with other entities? Did officers receive an opportunity and space to explore possibilities in running a program? What happened that made a program less effective over time? Did they need another champion? Could they not train somebody else? How is this part of the value system of the entire academy? Special skills. We need liaisons to bring communities and police together to fill in necessary functions. We need to implement programs, monitor its progress, and maintain these relationships. As community perceptions change and positive achievements fade, it's important to sustain any good work accomplished by maintaining relationships, by monitoring progress, and by allowing regular involvement in the decision-making impacting the community. This will allow the community to feel valued and to be re-energized and to stay connected. In terms of officers, we must be intentional in recruiting, hiring, training, supervising, developing, and continuously supporting them throughout their careers. What is currently working? Right now, PACT in Mount Kisco is working. Although it has evolved positively, it still is different from what it was in the beginning, but it does continue to be impactful. And what Carola mentioned to us is that not only does it work with county, but it also works with other police departments in the area. The particular materials that were shared with the task force with community engagement, co-chair Attorney Mayo Bartlett sent us a report entitled Engagement-Based Policing, the What, How, and Why of Community Engagement. I encourage everybody to read this as it reinforces many of the topics that were covered in this report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Corinne. That was, again, and thank the the working group. We understand and saw that you put a lot of time and effort in this and raised some interesting thoughts and recommendations. I would note that the first thing that you mentioned, there's a little crossover with the accountability working group. And that shows that we're thinking with like minds on certain issues, and I think that's a good thing. When you said you need more eddies, I mean, it's the same thing that was just reported, that you'd like to see more officers involved in community engagement. And so those two groups thinking similarly. In terms of when you mentioned intercultural competency, I thought that was an excellent definition of it that you gave. I wonder what, no, I'm kidding. I know where you got it. But I just wanted to highlight that and point out that a lot of times people hear that, they immediately think about implicit bias. But the way you laid it out is something different. It's something more involved and more insightful. Does anyone have any questions? Do we have any questions on the chat?
We have no questions in the chat, but again, I'll just repeat for everybody's reference. To access the chat, in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, there's a small button that says chat, and there's a speech bubble in it. Click on that and make sure that under the to column, it says to host. Type in your question and I'll answer it.
Any questions yet or no?
Nothing so far.
All right. And maybe what we can do is if anyone's having issues accessing the chat, we can revisit it. So if you have any questions you weren't able to ask, we can revisit it at the end of the meeting. We'll move now to the Transparency Working Group, and delivering the report on behalf of that working group is Barbara Hart.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the remarks so far. It's nice to see everyone break through the isolation of our current experience. Our working group, the transparency.
Somebody break through right there.
Duke, stop. Sorry. I wish I could put him on mute.
Oh.
Sorry about that. He's my COVID puppy. The Transparency Subcommittee has met twice. Thank you all for indulging my real life challenges. On September 24th and October 1st. We have not had guest speakers, but many of us did attend remotely the presentation that was put on by the state and found that quite informative, both the morning session and the afternoon session. And I myself found that quite educational. He's just started with this. I apologize.
He's
Okay.
probably seeing
Squirrel
it.
out there, yeah.
We're fine. Thank you.
Many of the topics that have been discussed by the two previous subcommittees also inform the discussion of the Transparency Committee. It's been a relatively short period since the last General Task Force meeting, but we did meet and talk twice. And in researching and looking at how transparent other police departments are around the county and state, it came to be evident that the Westchester County Police Department appears to be ahead of the curve. So there was an informal survey of various other towns and municipalities, cities, websites and information that they made available. And it seemed quite clear that the Westchester County Police Department, with respect to information provided on the website, was really spot on and in many respects ahead of the curve. The Transparency Subcommittee has discussed how the Westchester County Police Department can better equip itself in informing the public as to what it is doing and what its values are. And as noted previously, we had agreed on certain recommendations that had been presented. He can open that door, so just don't kid yourself that it's over. I won't kid myself. Since our prior General Task Force meeting, our discussions centered on peeling back, so to speak, the layers of transparency and exploring more of what the term actually means. Legislator Clements raised an interesting point, suggesting that a difference exists between how transparent the Westchester County Police Department believes it is versus the public's perception of how transparent it believes the Westchester County Police Department is. And then, of course, somewhere in between is the actual reality. All parties seem to agree that more can be done in this area to close the gap between the respective views of the public and the view of the Westchester County Police Department and the gap of the reality. On this note, the subcommittee is in the process of discussing and considering a renewed focus on communication with the public in order to foster an understanding between the Westchester County Police Department and the public. Recommendations of the group in general include, first of all, communicating the Westchester County Police Department's values and principles to the public, and letting more proactively the community know what the Westchester County Police Department is doing. Engage more with community leaders to ensure the community is aware of the Westchester County Police Department's policies, procedures, and activities. Ensure that the community is aware of monthly public safety meetings with respect to the Westchester County Police Department and those in their municipality by advertising the dates, times of those meetings on the Westchester County Police Department's website or the county executive's website and in the county executive's newsletter. There's also the discussion that we all benefited from regarding procedural justice, and part of this concept is the Westchester County Police Department being transparent in everything it does to the extent that it can without jeopardizing the safety of its officers or civilians and privacy concerns, providing the public with an opportunity to voice their comments or concerns. And I think that this has been touched upon again by the two earlier subcommittees as, you know, two sides of the coin. One of the other discussions that we had was whether or not be more information regarding evidence-based policing. During the day-long seminar, there was a lot of discussion about preconceptions of evidence-based policing and notions and of what would work and community outreach, and then the data actually on the backside of whatever programs were initiated sometimes did not bear out that resources were well spent in devoted to them once you actually scrutinized the outcomes based on devotion of resources and then long-term, tracking in terms of outcomes. So perhaps providing information, really drilling into what is working, why it's working, what isn't working, and disabusing both the police and the community as to, whether discussions of, in DARE, for instance, the evils of drug use or something actually creates curiosity or risk-taking that's undesirable, and what's the reality of it versus what's the feel-good appearance of it. So really trying to be evidence-based and then providing that evidence perhaps to the community as a resource so that they understand the decision-making and where resources are being devoted. What are some of the opportunities? This is something that the committee is continuing to discuss, and this will finish up my remarks in terms of what the committee is continuing to discuss, because at the outset, as I've seen some of the discussion and in listening to the participants in the discussion, which really share a variety of viewpoints and knowledge and my novice viewpoints in this and kind of ignorant questions sometimes, it seemed that sometimes with transparency, the concept is really accountability, that somehow what transparency means is the public wants accountability through transparency and thinks that it will have a better understanding. But on the other hand, it's possible that the Westchester County Police is really performing very well, and it too suffers from a reverse bias, and that transparency could involve more proactive communication out to the community that would help to dispel that bias or preconceived notion that the Westchester County Police is somehow falling short or hiding something. And so the proactive communication could help to dispel the bias that the police itself might encounter, and transparency kind of being a window as opposed to a wall, or a window going in both directions, giving an opportunity into the community, and not just about a pound of flesh vis-a-vis the police or scrutiny of the police. So that was one of the things that seems to be coming out of the discussions, and presents the possibility of both a challenge and an opportunity, that transparency could create a goodwill and an opportunity in the community so that they would better understand the successes of the Westchester County Police Department.
Standing report. And again, the group has done a tremendous amount of work. As you can see, again, clearly a lot of interdisciplinary issues. So we have a lot of the working groups that will be commenting on a number of similar issues from a slightly different perspective, sometimes the same perspective. But I think that this working group in particular may be one of the most important because it builds trust, and it will allow the community to have a good faith belief that nothing is being hidden. So to the degree that we can make things clearer, I think it's essential. Does anybody have any questions?
I apologize for my dog.
Not at all.
No,
I think that
it's okay.
it was greatly appreciated.
Yes.
I particularly like when you talked about accountability through transparency. Somewhere I can almost picture that in writing in the final report.
Any questions?
No
Carver?
questions at this time.
Okay. And one of the other things I just want to comment on is that a lot of things, to your point, were being done, but we were not making it clear that they were being done. So to that point, it does give quite often the wrong impression. So, and sometimes it's through no fault of our own, but to be able to go back and look at it and see how we can be more transparent, more accessible is pivotal. Thank you.
Okay. And you put
I'm going to go to, okay. The next presenter will be Dr. Damian Harris Madden, and she will be presenting on behalf of the Training and Equipment Working Group.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As was stated earlier, I'm Damian Harris Madden, and I am presenting on the Training and Equipment Work Group. Members include Dcjs Sanchala, our very own Commissioner Gleason, who sits by and allows us to kind of pull apart and tease apart areas that we need to discuss. And we also have Dr. Stephen Pogue, as well as Robert Tucker and Reverend Dr. Verlin Williams. Mayo is also an honorary member, so thank you for attending our meetings. We've had 3 meetings in September into October, where we have had guest speakers to include the Westchester County Department of Community Mental Health, and Mark Giuliano in particular has been very helpful in terms of giving us some insight regarding some of the existing partnerships as it relates to mental health. So just to give an overall context, and again, this report was prepared with most members in agreement, but I would like to give a disclaimer as we're still collecting data. And so there was not 100% consensus, and I will take responsibility as I prepared this report. I tried to capture the sentiments of most of the members, but realizing that there are differences, and I think it was Barbara who noted the gap between the espoused and reality. So, for members of the committee, we have some varying views, but we all agree that the Westchester County Police Department does a great deal, and we appreciate their service. So just the backdrop, in our last meeting, it was discussed some of the challenges that the committee was looking at. There were recommendations provided in the last report, so we don't need to, revisit those except in the context where we're addressing the challenges. So the first challenge was culture. The second was funding. And the third was acknowledging tactical perception, which is also known as implicit bias. And I appreciate what Corinne said in that there are different languages used. And for us, we choose to use cultural responsive responsiveness as opposed to intercultural competency, and noting that there is a difference between implicit bias and cultural responsiveness. This report really does focus on Westchester County PD as opposed to the state and local municipal agencies. We understand that in the future we will be, discussing those areas. So for the first challenge, which is for training, is culture. And the Westchester County Police Department training above and beyond the minimal Dcjs requirements in most areas, yet the committee recognizes there is opportunity to increase strategies that address the above challenges that we mentioned in the report, and also, as mentioned earlier, to collect evidence-based interventions and also leverage public and private partnerships. And we chose to approach this work with an intersectional framework, meaning that the committee recognizes that there's beliefs from certain groups that, certain groups of people are monolithic and therefore have been treated as such. And again, not necessarily with the Westchester County Police, but just police overarchingly. So to improve the tactical perception, the committee seeks to incorporate the umbrella term of cultural responsiveness into its training. And I'm going to refer to that as CRT going forward. CRT increases awareness and understanding of mental health, implicit bias, other related areas, and recognizes the importance of equipping officers with the strategies to recognize, respect, and respond to citizens of varying cultures, norms, and practices. And we want to emphasize the differences of, also protected classes that go beyond race, like the disabled, religious groups, those with different sexual orientations. CRT will also bring about, in our view, a greater skill set in terms of communication and de-escalation tactics. An intervention that addresses CRT is Georgetown University's Project ABLE, which stands for Active Bystandership for Law Enforcement. Project ABLE is a national hub for training, technical assistance, and research, and fosters strategies that aim to prevent harm and misconduct while creating a law enforcement culture that supports peer intervention and officer wellness. ABLE is closely related to the ethical policing is courageous, also known as the EPIC model, which the Westchester County PD has already been utilizing. And so this committee seeks to use a crosswalk, if you will, of the two models and discuss the effectiveness of both and whether ABLE is more aligned with the reimagining tasks. Existing interventions that we should note and that are doing relatively well between the Westchester County Police Department as well as the Westchester County Department of Community Mental Health includes the mental health curriculum that was created and is delivered through the County Police Academy. It is for 1 week only. They also provide the CIT training, which we will spend a great deal of time talking about, which stands for the Crisis Intervention Team. And this CIT model trains officers in depth to understand and address individuals with mental health and substance use needs. We know that co-occurring disorders are, prevalent. And so the CIT training really is useful for officers to have a greater understanding of mental health. But the committee does find that the advanced CIT would probably be more useful. Currently, there are about 12 officers, patrol officers, and supervisors that have the advanced training, yet we think that this is something we should explore. We would need to do, obviously, a cost analysis to determine if this is something that all patrol officers and supervisors would benefit and the county could afford. They also have the Crisis Stabilization Team, also known as CST, which works with the law enforcement, specifically to assist those with most serious needs or at risk of arrest and incarceration when they are in crisis in the county. You may recall that it's been discussed, the Greenburgh Police Department uses CST. I believe that was in our last meeting. But the hope is that this could be perhaps extended throughout the county. Another area which we thought was very useful to learn is the Clinician Embedded Teams, which is CET. CET currently operates within police departments in many areas throughout the county, to include Greenburgh again, White Plains, and New Rochelle, as well as Yonkers. And clinicians work collaboratively with the officers to provide guidance on crisis intervention, suicide prevention, and associated risk assessment of mental illness. The committee recommends that this be expanded. There was Reverend Pogue disclosed that there was a situation recently in Mount Vernon where there was, calls for either a crisis stabilization team or a clinician embedded team to provide aid to the community. And unfortunately, this was on a weekend and they could not find any help because they were told that the program had been minimized to Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So this committee seeks to explore opportunities to expand some of these models that are currently working and that are definitely in need. The other area of culture that we seek to address is the policies. And we realize that there have been multiple iterations of, policy changes. We want to note that in this current environment, there's been a resurgence of discussion about the use of force and surveillance tools, and this lends to the policies that we currently have. The Westchester County Police Department does not use surveillance tools such as stingrays or dirt boxes. However, thanks to Mayo, we were apprised of what these things are. And we want to look at, the training manuals to determine if these tools are prohibited, if there needs to be further conversation about this, particularly as we move towards, and again, this is disclaimer, not the committee's silly season, when we start to talk about things that may occur in the near future and, what may happen when you talk about, disorder control. Again, fortunately, our county police does not use forms of disorder control that would be extremely harmful, like tear gas and such. But, we want to make sure that whatever we implement in terms of policy, we're looking at our constitutional rights. We want to increase awareness regarding procedural justice tactics. And, the ultimate goal is to prevent any violation of human rights laws. So we're looking at, the training policies so that we can just make sure all bases are covered. And we do beg the question, if there is no use of, these extreme forms of disorder control, like tear gas, also the EMTs that are trained but not working in the capacity to administer deadly substances like ketamine, to what extent do we disclose this in our, revision, if you will, of the policy? So this is some of the discussion. Now, funding, that happens to be, something that everyone wants to look at, of course. We know that there will be some level of funding needed for reform. However, the committee is in its infancy stage regarding the collection of data on costs. We're looking at training hours, salaries associated with the interventions mentioned in this report, membership and training fees, equipment and technology expenses. And, one of the starting points is to assess the number of patrol officers and supervisors have training in certain areas and identify the gaps. Equipment and technology also enters this conversation because there is a need, particularly from our commissioner's perspective, to include a county-wide standardized records management system. And that, of course, would require buy-in from the various communities or local police departments. But that is an area that would be useful to the Westchester County Police Department, along with smartphones for all of the officers and the associated technology. So we know that there are applications that exist that NYPD uses, for example, as well as, bandwidth that can assist law enforcement in doing their jobs best. The committee has identified areas for shared services and collaboration to reduce the cost burden on the county. Some suggestions to address these costs include shared services with other PDs to cover for embedded officers or teams of embedded officers. We know that the Westchester County Department of Community Mental Health does a great job at securing grants, and maybe they have some ideas in terms of how we might secure funding to advance the CIT training. We want to also leverage other departments. There are departments currently that work with the Westchester County Police Department, like the Office of Women, the DA's office, again, DCMH, but of course, Human Rights Commission and the Youth Bureau should be included as we all pursue grants and could potentially be looking at ways in which we address procedural justice, cultural responsiveness, and marginalized populations to include juvenile delinquents and young people. We also talked about the private partnerships with Verizon, which exists in New York City and other places, which may allow for discounts on equipment and technology such as smartphones and ultra broadband services. So our recommendations, again, will be crafted based on the data that is further collected. But right now, we're looking to examine this able bystander intervention program and decide whether or not it is the model that we should go with as opposed to the existing EPIC model. We also, would like to look at Georgetown University's grant program that is running through 2020. Although the slots are currently filled, we did see that they may open up future free workshops, which would allow us to be able to send some officers for able train the trainer model. We would like to expand the CIT to 24/7 on-call operation. So we realize that that may take some resources, but we are looking to find those resources to ensure that the Mount Vernons won't have those kinds of problems again in terms of securing a clinician and police officer to respond. We want to also look at additional hours where, training can be expanded in procedural justice, noting that, again, implicit bias is included in the training, but it is one distinct element, just as, working with mental health is one distinct element. We want to look at the cultural responsiveness as an overarching objective. We want to examine shared services model and funding for standardized records management systems and identify the costs that would be necessary for the smartphone. So, our next steps really, again, are to look at the dollars and cents, what it's going to cost. We need to confirm the number of officers that receive advanced CIT training and how many the commissioner feels he can allow to attend training, because obviously that means patrols off of the streets. And so we want to make sure that that is feasible. We do have an aim, which is to have 10 to 20% of officers within the next 5 years receive advanced CIT training, which will support responses for, cultural responsiveness and specifically for the mental health area. We want to also support the psychological and emotional supports for officers' wellness to avert unintended aggression and use of force towards others, identifying resources and opportunities for shared services to embed CIT trained officers. We also would like to explore costs for the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights Training for police departments. And that would be for the municipal agencies as well as the county police, so that they are adequately responding to bias incidents. And finally, we know that we have much more work to do in terms of diving into the police manual for areas to update the policy and procedures. And that concludes our report.
Yeah, thank you very much. Phenomenal report. You guys have been doing a tremendous amount of work. One of the things that seems to be common, again, is that there's a lot of overlap. But the other thing is, going back to your report as well as to Corinne's report, looking at the police department in terms of an entire department instead of just looking at one or two officers trained to respond in particular areas, I think is outstanding. And also the fact that you're looking into the future for things that maybe we're not doing yet, but that could occur. And that's a lot of vision involved there. So I thank you and thank the entire group, at all of the working groups across the board. Does anybody have any questions?
So we have two
Beautiful,
questions right now. First question is from Damon Jones. Damon, you're unmuted now, just so you're aware.
And you're presenting next, Damon, so remember.
Hello, everybody. It's a great report. My question was, out of the use of force after the Christopher Ridley shooting, when we're talking about training, there was a use of force, the use of force review board. One of the recommendations that came out of the use of force review board by Westchester County after the Christopher Ridley shooting was the increase in people, in Black and brown people, Hispanic and Black people in training. Did the county ever increase that? Because I know maybe it was 3 years ago, we had to revisit that when they had the shooter of Christopher Ridley speak to the cadets and talk about that. And a lot of the Mount Vernon officers that came there were very upset. So I wanted to know, was there any correction or any attempt to have more people of color as trainers in the academy?
Thank you, Damon. I wrote that question down. Unfortunately, I do not have the answer for that, and I'm not sure that the commissioner is a host on the panel, so he's unable to respond to it. But that is certainly something that has come up in terms of like areas of recruitment and training, but not specific to whether there has been an increase since, unfortunately, Mr. Ridley was shot and killed. So I will take that question back unless, Copper, there's a way to allow
Yeah, I can
Gleason
pull
to
it
weigh in.
now if that's okay with you guys.
And I'm not sure that he has that number, but I do think that it's a question that's worthy to be answered.
Yeah.
And Damon, I think that's a phenomenal question. And again, we invite those same questions from anybody that's a member of the task force, because it's critical that if you happen to be in one task force working group, we recognize that all of you are just as capable of being in any other working group. So don't leave that expertise out. If you have information you think we should be aware of or that we should be considering, by all means, share that information. It gives us an opportunity to go back and to make sure that our work is as complete as it can be. So we'll look into that, and we'll be able to get back to you on that. And there may be even an opportunity to discuss it further. And to the degree you have additional information or things we should be aware of, please forward it.
There's another question.
There's one other question. Damon Marr asked to be unmuted so he could ask a series of questions. I'm going to unmute you now, Damon, just to give you a heads up. Damon, you should be unmuted now.
Thank you. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the police tell us that they don't want to be, or they're not trained to be psychologists or social workers. And in talking and reading and in talking with some officials, municipal officials, they say 15 to 20% or thereabouts of calls are mental health related. Someone's having an episode of some sort. So the question is, do we have a way of directly referring to a unit that would handle this kind of, a team of psychologists, whatever it may be, rather than through a 911 dispatcher or a 211 dispatcher, without having to send the fellows with the weapons and full police accoutrement every time. And I asked if we had a presentation from 211, and they want to hear if there's some sort of issue that can be dealt with better that way. But there's not, it's not as publicized. Everybody knows what 911 is, but nobody knows what 211 is. I guess so. That's the discussion whether dispatchers are trained to work out what kind of call it is and whether it can be directed to someone other than a police officer or police officers arriving at the scene.
So, legislator, I will say that we learned that there is this clinician embedded team, and it's relegated to certain parts of the county. It is not across the county. So to your point, our recommendation is to expand this model. And we also discussed, perhaps working with some of the unions, so that when they're creating their collective bargaining unit, maybe there's incentives so that we can have more education of police officers in a formal capacity. But to speak to your point about the way in which the police officers receive the information, that I am not 100% clear on. Again, the commissioner would need to say where, how CETs become involved. I'm imagining that you do call the police department with a situation, just as you would 911. But that area, that's a question that we can ask. How exactly do the CETs get deployed? And again, right now it's just in New Rochelle, Greenburgh, White Plains, and Yonkers, and we recommend that it be expanded.
Contemplated was the possibility of looking at a shared services model where we might be able to partner with the different municipalities. So we might be able to have a hub throughout the county, perhaps 4 or 5, maybe more jurisdictions where we have some of the smaller municipalities coming together, perhaps with the county, to form a unit, much as we do with SWAT teams, where you have each municipality contributing resources and officers who are receiving the training. That's something that we're considering. It's not finalized at this point. And we've also discussed the routing of 911 calls. And perhaps we can look at, to your point, a model either where it's going directly to another number, but then we need to engage in significant community outreach so people are aware. The other thing that we can do is make sure that dispatchers get enough information to determine whether police need to actually be deployed to begin with. So it's still a work in progress. It'll continue to be even after we give our report. But those are some of the things we're contemplating. Again, to the degree that you have suggestions, by all means, please share them, even if it's outside of the working group that you're currently engaged with. And that way we can consider it and follow up on it. It'll be something that we can work on down the road.
And if I could just echo, I appreciate those questions because, we want to make sure that we're covering as many bases as possible. And something like deployment of the CET, that's something that we should know. And as well as if there's been an increase since the shooting in the number of people of color trained. I mean, these are excellent questions, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
So we have 2 more actually, unless you guys
Okay, no, please.
So first is from Mr. Tom Luzio. Tom, I'm going to unmute you now, sir. You should be unmuted and able to speak.
Hi, Doctor. Really nice presentation, and I really think some of those areas of the curriculum that you recommend being added your group are extremely important, and certainly sympathize with the commissioner's inability and lack of resources to train to institute that, almost every officer in the department now. But has your group given any consideration to replacing existing training, such at the academy and throughout the career at supervisor school, et cetera, replacing the existing training with any of the 5 or 6 curriculums, that those be integrated into the existing training at the supervisor school and continuing education is what we lawyers would have to go through. So I would be looking, and I'd be interested in where can we reduce things that we have spent money on and replace it with these very, very, very important ideas that your working group has come up with. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm getting questions today, but they're good ones, because this is something that we also talked about. We don't want to diminish what's, working, but as I said before, difference between espoused and reality. What I think is true and accurate may be a different account for someone else. And so we're looking at these different interventions, which is why we brought about ABLE, right? And then we only learned after reading about it, that there's some variation of that being offered. So you're right. We don't want to duplicate our efforts. We want to find what's most effective. And this is where our work is really starting to take us. So unfortunately, I don't have 5 or 6, suggestions right now, but ABLE is where we spent a lot of time, as well as what does DCMH currently offer and what might we eliminate in terms of, the training or add to. So it was brought up the cost factor, and the time spent by the officers. How much time will they be removed, and how many opportunities are there for there to be ongoing, mentioned continuing education? That's what many of us in our field do. And so some of us on the task force have questioned that. Where are there opportunities? We know that there's ongoing firearm training, even though in New York State, for example, the use of firearms have gone down over the years. But, but firearm training is necessary, right? So then where else might we look to kind of supplement or add, a new training, innovation? We are discussing all of this. And again, it's a matter of quantifying what the costs are, also looking at the interventions that make sense, and then taking advantage of free opportunities like Georgetown's, where, it's the cost would be travel. Well, now it's virtual anyway, so not so much travel, but, what those opportunities look like so that we can have a better assessment.
Beautiful.
Okay, next question.
So the next question is from Michael Hagan. Michael, I'm going to unmute you right now, sir, for you to speak. You should be unmuted now.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. Go ahead.
So I just have some, the question that I have is, it sounds like I'm going to need a doctorate pretty soon in order to keep this job. With all the training and, that we have, which is going to be expensive. So I don't know if there's going to be a cost analysis associated with this, which, I think is what prevents us from doing a lot of this to begin with. But when it comes to the mental health related stuff, the question that I have is, we keep hearing about how, we need to be more, we need to be more educated on mental health. When I first got on this job, we had the crisis intervention team. They had they had an office up at the airport and they were in a trailer up there, and they used to come out to these crisis calls. But the county decided that it was too expensive. They got rid of them. They didn't give us the money. They said, well, we can't afford them anymore. And we're like, all right, now who do we call? Man, we'll call anybody. Take care of it. Okay? So that's the position that we were put in. Okay? It's not this whole idea that we want to go to these mental health calls. It kind of, I keep hearing it as if it's something that we're trying to protect. We're not. You want to send mental health people out there, send them out there. So I just want to reiterate that we're not going to a mental health call per se. We're going to a public safety call. Mental health might be the underlying reason for that public safety call, but people are mostly dialing 911 because it has now become a public safety emergency. So where the mental health system has failed and that person is now acting out and somebody feels that their safety is in jeopardy, they'll dial 911. Okay, and that's why we come out. We're not looking to come out and deal with every mental health issue that's out there. We would be more than happy to stand back and let the mental health officials take care of this stuff. So just this, I just want to make it clear that within the police profession, within the guys who are responding to jobs, we're going there, and our job at the scene is to make sure that public safety of everybody involved is looked after. Not, and yes, if part of doing that is to get them the mental health, help that they need, we're on top of it. So we're on board with that. It's just, I just think a lot of times we just keep getting fingers pointed in our direction as if we want to keep doing it, and it's not something that that we're trying to defend or trying to, keep doing.
Go ahead. Michael, thank you very much for making that point very clear. I, quite frankly, have become educated to that since I've been on the task force, and hearing you, I've heard you say this before. And so that's quite welcoming to the committee and the working groups, that's the posture that you have, because I think that we'll be looking at it going forward from the standpoint of how can these groups assist? Can they be of effort? Because we're on the same page with, we want to figure out best practices and the best approach to it. So thanks for pointing that out and making that clear to the entire task force.
I think I also just want to make it clear, I don't think anybody on the task force was pointing a finger at the police department. I think if anything, and you can correct me if I'm misreading the report, my understanding was that it was a recognition that the police are not asking to go to these calls unless needed, and that when people call 911, quite often for medical calls, that the police are sent when they didn't need to be sent. And then it leads to unnecessary interaction, which sometimes results in conflict. Sometimes it results in the police being able to aid them. We don't hear about that. But to the degree we can diminish those types of interactions, we're looking at what the report contained. And Damian, I think you did a phenomenal job with the report. We're looking at how it's routed. So for instance, if someone doesn't need police assistance, you have somebody who's sick in the house and you're calling for an ambulance, that it's routed directly to the place where it should go.
Exactly, and thank you. I also want to echo that. One of the things we do underscore is the financial and the cost benefit analysis that will need to be done, but also recognizing that these services have been diminished over time. And so as a result, officers are responding as, and they arrive to a scene where it's really would be best served for a social worker to be there. And that is perhaps why we've had so many issues, particularly within certain communities where police officers are trained to respond from a law enforcement perspective. And we're looking at the potential of how do we have embedded teams? How do we have more crisis intervention, opportunities so that the police are not responding, or if they respond, they are then able to refer to a specialized group that can handle the very complex issue of mental health, because regarding suicidal ideation might be different from a call from someone else with another disorder. So, we recognize that, Michael, and thank you.
Thank you.
We have one more statement. Mr. Kenneth Chamberlain Jr. wanted to make a short statement. So, Kenneth, I'm going to unmute you now, sir. You should be unmuted.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to kind of piggyback on the statement that Mayo made, as well as Dr. Madden. No, we're not pointing fingers at law enforcement and acting as if you guys want to respond to mental health calls. It is how you handle the mental health call when you arrive at the scene. And more times, what we found is that most officers are treating a mental health call like it's a criminal call, like you were called to deal with some type of criminal suspect. And more times than not, when you hear these people who say, well, I dialed 911, they called 911 not because they fear for their safety, but they fear for the safety of the person who was in mental distress at that time. So we have to understand that the officer's job is to diffuse a situation, not create a situation when they're on that type of call. And yes, it is a money issue, and I think it's unacceptable that you don't have a crisis intervention team that's functioning around the clock, that's able to respond to calls like this, because you need them in place and you need them to be able to respond with officers in situations like that. Because when you look at a lot of the statistics, which I have for obvious reasons, you like 2 in 5 people with mental illnesses have been arrested by police officers, so, or 2 in 5 encounters with police and people with mental illness, police will be involved, and then it ends up in a criminal court instead of in the hospital where they should be treated. So it's definitely something that we have to look at, and we have to try to figure out how we're going to involve law enforcement and how they deal with individuals with mental health issues. And something that we talked about in our committee is if you can find money for tanks and these big tactical trucks and everything else, you can certainly find money for mental health services. And I mean, that's just my feeling about that across the board. You don't respond to a mental because you believe that it's a public safety issue with a tactical truck.
All right, we have two more reports to get through. Ken, thank you for your comments.
We do have County Executive George Latimer would like to make a brief comment on crisis intervention teams. So I will, George, I'm going to unmute you now. We should be able to hear you now, sir.
Okay, I'll be very brief. The whole purpose of this committee is to point out ideas of things that we need to do. And what I pick up out of this last comment from Mike to Ken, Michael Hagan to Kenneth Chamberlain, is we need to do something that we used to do that we haven't done in the last number of years. That represents a recommendation of something we have to do. The fact that it was discontinued a number of years ago, and now we have the opportunity to look forward. So I view that as that's how I wrap up this last 4 or 5 comments, all of which I think were helpful. And I think the rest of us are picking this up as a perfect example of what this committee recommends to us. You recommend that we need to reestablish the mental health crisis teams to be available to handle these kind of issues, then that is a substantive suggestion that we have to then look at.
Okay.
Next group.
Thank you very much. So we'll go to the next group, Qualifications and Recruitment.
Let him go last.
Oh, I'm sorry, Policies and Procedures with Damon Jones. You have the floor, Damon.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Damian Jones. I'm on the Policy and Procedure Working Group. We had 2 meetings since the last time we gave a report. We had no guest speakers for the last 2 meetings. So the outcomes are these are the key ongoing actions. Assessing public safety duties, which could be handled by DSS or some other institution like the Crisis Intervention Team. Policies and procedures. We're interested in meeting jointly with training and equipment to discuss the Crisis Intervention Team in greater detail. Assessing the policies and procedures associated with more civilian or retaining positions like SROs. Working to determine how the policies and procedures are generally overseen, what procedures prevent departments from producing arbitrary internal policies in more distant communities. Working to assess the extent to which old or outdated policies and procedures enable or encourage officers to perform incidents of misconduct. Reaching out to CALEA to learn more about national accreditation, how its policies and procedures are determined, and what work CALEA has done to propagate this accreditation, recognizing that CALEA is a private entity and there is profit motive. Additionally, we are looking into the process for accrediting and training facility, any potential passion, and involving MOUs with local municipalities that they could be trained through the county under a CALEA national standard, which would be better for local municipalities. Reaching out to ABLE to learn more about the active bystandership, analyzing potential directions for whistleblower protections or policies punishing retaliation or harassment of whistleblowers. I think that is, what's going on with Mount Vernon And I know the officer in Buffalo, Carol Horn, who stopped the officer from choking another officer and reported it, and she lost her job. I think to address whistleblower issues is very important. Working to assess whether supervisors, for example, sergeants, lieutenants, are significantly held accountable, especially those that are in presence of other officers. We use George Floyd as an example, even though George, the officer that killed George Floyd, he was a FTO. He was a field training officer that had 17 complaints. How was he a field training officer? How did he be able to start training officers that he had 17 complaints over 20 years? So, I mean, those things, is it a lack of management? Or we have to look into that? Because when you look at a lot of cases of police criminality, a lot of the officers had years of complaints behind them. And then it ends up into a deadly situation, which nobody wants. Initial recommendations. The county must require officers to identify the county for legal fees and financial losses when convicted of grossly negligent and intentional misconduct. This could be negotiated through the collective bargaining agreement. Implement active bystandership at the county public safety and in the county police academy in partnership with ABLE. Send instructors to participate in the ABLE Train the Trainer event. Ensure that public safety officers follow the code of conduct comparable to the code of ethics, which other county workers are expected to follow. Ensure this code of ethics accommodates for conflict of interest. Identify and remove out-of-date policies and procedures to ensure that the process is transparent so other municipalities can easily identify and replicate our answers to outdated policies. Implement explicit whistleblower policies and protections. Criminalize whistleblower retaliation to the greatest extent possible. Westchester County's Department of Public Safety should pursue national accreditation. What are some of the opportunities that we see within the issue area? County public safety can present itself as a model for other municipal police departments. Implementing a national accreditation can save money on liability insurance. Officers trained through nationally accredited agencies also are giving significant career prospects. Implementing policy change at the county police academy can positively impact the policing services of other municipalities throughout Westchester County. What are some of the challenges? There are not incident financial costs associated with national accreditation. It does cost money. Officers in Westchester are often very familiar and friendly with one another as they frequently pass through departments, collaborate across municipal lines, and usually trained at the academy together. This makes detecting incidents of misconduct more difficult and will impede on any challenge to the officer culture. Agencies which might otherwise monitor these departments for misconduct, such as the DA's office, are often staffed by veterans of municipality departments. This potentially causes a conflict of interest on misconduct investigations. A reliance on profit, especially in smaller municipal contexts, complicates the delivery of critical policing services. For example, parking tickets may serve as a revenue generator for some municipalities, despite the negative impact they can have on lives of lower income residents. Residents and diligent officers do know who to report, do not know who to report misconduct or corruption to. Agencies which might at one point be responsible for oversight change with political fortunes. What is currently working? The County Public Safety Department use of force policy, which is often highlighted as a model by Dcjs and other institutions. County Public Safety, additionally, one of the few agencies which is accredited by New York State Dcjs. Generally, public safety has a diverse array of programs and training, which, if properly supported and implemented, could create a model policy agency. The presence of the crisis intervention team, even in their diminished capacity, is leagues ahead of most other police departments in the nation. Public safety community policing models in Mount Kisco and the community goodwill that Officer Ramirez generated through this model has tremendous potential. And that's the report. Any questions?
We're unmuted.
Okay, thank you, Damon. We know, having sat through some of those meetings, that it's been a lot of discussion and a lot of material that we've had to examine. We appreciate you giving the report. Are there any questions from anyone? Anything in the chat room?
Nothing yet.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Okay, so let's go to our final report. Last but not least, we have Martin McDonald to give the qualification and recruitment.
Good afternoon. Is my mic on? I got to take, yes, my mic is on. Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and try to present on behalf of the Qualifications and Recruitment Committee. We've been having a tough time. Our committee is finding it difficult to meet and maintain our collective focus due to several factors beyond our control. We're trying our best to regroup and keep moving forward. Such is the way of life in 2020, right? That's what we do. We keep moving forward. We've lost an integral member of our community, County Legislator Lyndon Williams. We congratulate him on his appointment to the City Court Judge in Mount Vernon. It's our loss as the City of Mount Vernon's gained. Lyndon, as many of you know, really a resource of information and connections, not likely to be replaced, but we must press on. Our committee has met several times previously. We only had one meeting since our last group meeting here. We have not had any speakers to come in, but we are definitely pressing forward as best we can. We have split our group up, those that remain, two subgroups to see in research, review, and reporting. We're going to have subgroups. The other group is going to deal with recruitment. Our qualification members will be Chief Padilla and Reverend Frank Coleman. And then on the other side, we will have recruitment, Lawrence Otis Graham, and myself. Outcomes, identifying key issues, needs. Key issues in the qualifications were listed as focusing on test scores and background checks. The recruitment process should be outcome-driven to recruit officers capable of achieving certain specified outcomes, including good decision-making and problem-solving skills, and good communication skills. I want to pause for and just say that this report was originally going to be presented by Chief Padilla, who is not able to be with us today, is not able to join us today. Chief Padilla is just another reflection of some of the challenges that we've had in our committee. He had a setback, an unfortunate and sad situation that came up within his department last week. A fellow officer, 25-year-old, committed suicide on Thursday. And the chief and our condolences go out to the family and the young man and the chief and his department during this difficult time of bereavement. This is just another side of being an officer that we often forget, and yet we press on. Chief Padilla has been an integral member and part of this committee in helping us to understand the rules and regulations and nuances that are connected to the qualifications and recruitment procedures and practices that are faced by individual municipalities in the county. I think, from my perspective, what I'm learning and what I'm grateful to be here to find out is that I think Westchester County Police Department is in a good spot, and some great things are coming out in this process is bearing that out, making that even more clear to me. I'm standing in as the replacement for the chief to do the best I can to give you a report and update from our committee. Our Qualifications and Recruitment Committee, I think, is very critical to the process. It's about getting the right people in at the right time and trying to find the resources and trying to find people that will fill in the gaps that we are missing. We're looking for diversity, if we're looking for minorities, if we're looking for people of color to be in these positions to help balance the equity of how things are being done, then it's critical that we work hard on the qualifications and recruitment, because there are certain challenges that come up with that. Some of the challenges are connected to the testing, the tests themselves. We got to look at the test and see how are the tests being administered, what are the tests really measuring, really proving, as well as the recruitment. Where are we looking for these people? And again, the county from Deputy Commissioner Raynor had given us a long list of different places where they have looked, are looking, and the partnerships that they have throughout the county. Very impressive and great that that's being done. In one of our earlier conversations, we had thought about the idea of how we can develop a feeder program through the schools districts, through the high schools, similar to the Today's Students, Tomorrow's Teachers program, where we look to encourage our young people of color to be a part of the law enforcement community. And with that would be some type of a mentor, definitely a mentor for your college year, for your high school years and your college years. And you get to go into college, you get half your tuition off. And then after you're done and you graduate and you come back into your community and you serve in your community for at least 3 years before you move on. We know that, people that are born and raised in the community tend to know the people in it. Could alleviate a lot of the different challenges related to, when someone's having an episode and we don't know how to handle it, but there's just that personal relationship building if we're able to recruit, train, graduate, and hire people from the community that they grew up in and make it look good to them. Maybe give them some type of special support, things like that. So we're looking at different ways, creative ways to try to build the pool, if you will, and get more people involved. Our committee, again, diving deep into testing and scores and education requirements, looking at what are the education requirements and how we don't want to overburden officers with having to feel like they, as was mentioned earlier, that you got to have a special degree and taking all these classes. But that's important, that we continue to improve and set those benchmarks. I think it will help. We think it will help. So I'd also like to make mention of something that was raised regarding sharing some of our discussions. I think Chief Padilla has done such a brilliant job at explaining so many of the nuances and things to us that police chiefs are faced with, that it might be helpful for some of the discussions or that discussion to be shared with police departments. I'm not sure, that's not necessarily connected to the Westchester County Police, but as we're moving forward, we're trying to encourage police municipalities throughout the county. The way he speaks and the way he articulates things, I think it could relieve a lot of the angst and anxiety that some police chiefs might have about, why are we being attacked? And his presentation sets you at ease that no, it's not about being attacked. It's about trying to move forward and find the right answers so that we can do the right thing. Lastly, I just want to share with you a thought or a feeling that I had that I shared with the committee related to this whole process. And I got to tell you, I guess we'll end where we started, because I had to share with the committee that while I'm glad to have the opportunity to be a part of this important process, and special thanks and shout out to Crystal Collins for leadership. It has been my pleasure to work with everyone in this committee, and I appreciate what everyone's doing. My reason for being on the task force did not come easy. It was a hesitation, a heavy hesitation. I wasn't sure that I'd be involved because I didn't. As a 60-year-old black man, I got some challenges. I got some doubts. All right, I've seen things that were put up in place, and they were meant to do one thing, but they fall short. So I didn't want to be a part of something just so somebody could make a check mark. Oh, we did it, but you didn't really do it. So that was a real concern for me. Glad to say that through these discussions and through the meetings with the committee and what I'm hearing today, I think there's more to it. But I still have that one critical question that I think is in the back of many minds. People of color, people that I know, my peers, we've been through this for a while, and we always have that one question that asks, why is it so hard to get rid of the bad cop? We can do all this training, we can do all this research, we can do all this recruiting, we can do procedures, we can be transparent, but back to where Colin Smith, accountability. We got to be able to hold these officers accountable. The bad ones, because the overwhelming majority are good, but the frustration with the community and people that I know is that we have a hard time getting rid of the bad cop that makes everybody else look bad. So with that, that's all I have. I got to tell you that I know Chief Padilla would have done a much better job. He's had a whole nother report to get to you, but I got to say that the Qualifications and Recruitment Committee, we are a critical component to the work that's being done, and we look forward to pushing on and getting it done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Martin, thank you for sharing the information about the officer and the chief's department. So everybody's hearts and prayers go out to him and to that department, to the community. I have to say the chief would be very pleased and very proud with the presentation you made. You did a phenomenal job. You guys have worked through a lot of challenges, but the effort has been tremendous. The interest has been phenomenal, and you're a phenomenal working group. And again, it's going to be pivotal to the success of what we do. And I think I speak for everybody that we've all had a chance to interact with each other a lot. Leroy and myself have had a chance to interact with virtually every working group significantly. And I think everybody's here for the right reasons, and everybody's here out of honest concerns. And even if sometimes it appears that we come and approach it from different angles, I think it's in good faith. And I just think you did an outstanding job. So thank you for your participation. You're tremendously valued.
I have one question.
I think we have a question for you.
Yes, we do. Damian, would you like me to unmute you so that you can ask it, or do you want me to? I can also just read it.
Who is it from?
It's from Legislator Damian Marr.
Yeah.
Damian, I'm just going to unmute you so you can ask your question. I'm going to unmute you right now.
Thank you. Yeah, so in New Rochelle, I think we have a requirement that equivalent of about 2 years of college as a strict requirement for a recruiter trainee. So my question is, so that's sometimes in conflict with getting recruits and trainees out of the community who may not have attained that level yet. I mean, how do you balance that? Which way do we sort of come down as to which is more important at this point?
Well, if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's a matter of college credit. And if that's a strict requirement for what we're proposing for the Westchester County Police, that they should have a strict requirement for college credits, is that what the question is? I think, I guess you're muted, but we've been talking about that, and Chief Padilla raised some great points again on there's that route where you got the college experience, and then there's people that have been in the military and have served in the military that they are also qualified, and we got to figure what that looks like. And so it could be a recommendation that comes out of our committee as we explore it further. We'll have to look deeper into it and then make the recommendation.
But does that, oh, I'm sorry, but does that exclude sometimes people from the community that have, have more experience in the community, in certain communities where people may not have that opportunity for that level of education?
That's a great question. I think we got to talk more about it. I had to miss a couple of meetings in August. I lost a sister due to COVID, and it just took me out. So they may have had that conversation. I'm not sure that they have, and I can't really comment on it, but we can take it back to the committee and get back to you.
If I may, I think I can address it to a bit. The working group has been considering all of these things, as has the community engagement working group. And if you go back to what Ms. Patino was talking about in terms of Officer Ramirez, one of the things that I think we need to be doing across the board is looking at what are the metrics and whether those metrics make sense. And I think we've talked about it specifically, you know, some of the physical requirements should not be non-starters, whether you can do 60 push-ups or sit-ups when probably once you've been on the job for a few years, you're not doing that, and you're not necessarily required to do that. That's why you have fellow officers and a radio that you can use. So we're looking at ways to recruit the best people that we can find. We're looking at ways to reward some of the things that were not quantifiable that would have in the past maybe not helped somebody get the job, or maybe not allowed that person to move up the ranks of leadership. So Legislator Marge, great question. And again, great presentation, and our condolences, Martin, on the loss of your sister. And even more, you know, I mean, tremendous amount of respect for you and for your willingness to step up and to give this presentation on short notice. But these are definitely things that we're considering. And the beauty of this is the reimagining component allows us to look outside of what we've been doing to find other models where we can bring in people who otherwise would be excluded but are great candidates.
We actually do have
Agreed.
one more request to make a statement from Damon Jones. Martin, I don't know if you'd like to respond to Leroy, to Mayo
To
before
Damon?
I unmute Damon.
No, let Damon go ahead.
Thank you.
Damon, you're unmuted now.
Yeah, we usually find that the educational requirement is kind of keeps is a way to keep people of color out. It's not a coincidence that the Department of Corrections is majority black and brown, and county police is majority white. Right? There's no we've known this for years. I've been working for the county for 30 years. Corrections, you only need a GED. You don't need a college requirement. So, but also, it doesn't take. I think the college requirement should be pulled out because the college requirement doesn't change your test score. It doesn't change your score by the test score, right? It's just a tool whether we're going to promote you higher or not. So if a person gets 100 on the test and he doesn't have college credit, so he should get the job. I think that's kind of unfair because the way we promote is just through the test.
Trying to move it along. Okay.
You know, and some people with master's and doctor's degrees some of them don't know the job better than the person that has the GED. So I think that should be pulled out.
And in certain municipalities, yes.
Just as a side note, Commissioner Gleason just mentioned in chat he wanted to note that county police don't actually have a college requirement at this time.
So
No.
you now everybody can leave corrections and go.
You better watch out. Here we come.
That's a good note. All right, that's a good note to segue.
All 700 of us.
You gotta pass the test. All right.
I think there's an equivalency.
Thank everyone who presented today for their excellent presentations. You continue to demonstrate that the county executive chose wisely in placing you on the task force, and you continue to demonstrate that a lot of hard work and a lot of discussion is taking place, and we'll be moving forward as we to try and achieve the goals that are laid out in front of us. We're going to have some announcements in a minute. However, the next thing on the agenda is a chance for observations on the Dcjs webinar on police reform. I know a couple of the reporters mentioned that they had observed it. I know some people have seen only the morning part and not the afternoon, and vice versa. If anyone has anything of note that they'd like to relate to the task force as a whole about that webinar, I'm going to give you an opportunity to do that now. By the way, I will note that my understanding is that it was recorded It is on the DCJS website, and we'll look to find out what the link is to make sure that it can be distributed to the task force, and so you can have an opportunity to go and have a firsthand hearing of it. Just note in the chat room, and you'll be unmuted, and we'll give you an opportunity at this time to speak.
There's also one additional comment from Commissioner Gleason that he wanted to make clear earlier.
Thank you.
By all means, go right ahead, Commissioner Gleason.
Commissioner Gleason wanted to note that the public safety does actually have social media in addition to the website. Public safety uses Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to put out information and messaging on current events. Commissioner, I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to mention at this time. I'm happy to unmute you if you would like.
And I encourage the working, am I unmuted?
We're unmuted, yes.
Yeah, I encourage the task force members to go on the website and go on and explore these things that Commissioner Gleason has pointed out, so that when we discuss them, and when you discuss them in the working groups, you can discuss them intelligently.
Great. I'm going to unmute the commissioner now so he can continue his statement. Commissioner, you are unmuted at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I know there was a lot of talk earlier in some of the other groups about the website, and the website is still a work in progress. We are trying to get a number of things added to it, but I thought it was important because I didn't hear anyone else mention all the things that we're posting on social media regarding our community engagement. So we've been really focusing on that, in the past couple of years, and so I would just ask anyone that hasn't, please take a look, especially our Facebook page, and you can certainly also follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Did you have any
no other
thing
questions
on chat on DCJS or anything?
Nothing in chat regarding DCJS at this time.
Okay, so again, I reiterate, we'll send a link out so you can have an opportunity to view all those who are inclined to. Announcements now. Blanca.
Hi, everyone. So I want to thank all of you for participating in our third meeting. I also want to thank our internal committee for helping and guiding our working groups as well. All of you play such a valuable role in this process. I wanted to just take a couple of minutes to just remind everyone about the upcoming public forums. All of you should have received the flyers in English and in Spanish. Please share them with your networks. We would like to have a really great turnout. As a reminder, we're having 3 in-person locations, and this is going to take place on Tuesday, October 27th from 6 to 8 p.m. The in-person locations will be in Mount Vernon at the Dole Center, Cortland at the Morabito Community Center, White Plains at the Eastview Middle School Auditorium. In addition, we will have a virtual forum that will take place on the same night at the same time. The flyers that I sent to you have the information as to how to register. And for the virtual forum, people will also be allowed to call in if they don't have access to the internet. And the phone numbers are also listed on the flyer. We are also accepting written comments, and they can send those to policereformtf@westchestergov.com. If any of you would like to attend any of these forums, please let us know so that we can acknowledge you in a proper way. And if you have any questions, by all means, please let me know. And of course, if anybody's attending the in-person forums, we will be following social distancing, and we request that everyone wear a mask to attend. Thank you.
Any questions on that?
Nothing right now.
Okay. You have any wrap-up words before we do the? We're pointing out that the next task force meeting, a reminder, is on November the 5th from 3 to 5 p.m. And I'm looking forward to it because each time the reports get narrower and more concentrated. And so we're looking forward to the one on November the 5th. I can read Mayo's mind because I know that next he is going to want to say a special thanks to the staff for everything that they are doing and attending and all of the working groups meetings and being able to get back in contact with us and let us know what's going on and making sure that there's inter-office, if you will, communication so that we can clear a number of things up and move forward deliberately.
You did. You read my mind. But I also want to thank all of the task force members because I know that we go through, I'll say, thousands of pages of documents, and everybody is familiar with the information. People take the time to research. People submit their own research and bring sometimes some of the best points to us. So I think that that's tremendous. And I just appreciate you giving of yourselves so freely. And I also want to thank our county executive, who has been so attentive and just pays attention to everything we do. So for anybody going in the work we're trying to do, just by his comments today, I think that they should be gone. I mean, we're going to have an honest debate about the work that should be done here and what's necessary. And I think we have a really great opportunity to do some tremendous things that are going to leave future generations in a much better position than we're in right now. So with that, I hope everybody, from my comments at least, I hope everybody does well and is healthy. And I look forward to seeing everybody soon.
For the distribution component,